Karen slammed the lavender envelope onto the coffee table with such force that the ceramic coasters rattled like bones. Inside, she claimed, was a handwritten love letter from Judy to her boyfriend Mark, complete with intimate details only a secret lover would know. But 3 minutes and 42 seconds later, a single photograph of a birthday card would expose something Karen never saw coming. The real author of that letter wasn't the quiet girl she was trying to destroy. It was the best friend sitting right beside her, smiling like a viper in Sunday clothes. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The intervention happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the cramped back room of Riverside Community Center, where the fluorescent lights buzzed like trapped insects and the smell of burnt coffee hung thick enough to choke on. This wasn't a scheduled meeting or some official gathering. This was an ambush, carefully orchestrated by Karen with the precision of a prosecutor preparing for trial. She'd sent exactly 14 text messages the night before, each one dripping with urgency and barely concealed rage, demanding that everyone show up to witness what she called the end of a friendship and the exposure of a snake. The room was packed, not with strangers, but with people who'd known each other since grade school, their histories tangled like fishing line at the bottom of a tackle box. Phones were already out before anyone even sat down, cameras aimed and ready, because in a town this small, drama wasn't entertainment. It was currency and everyone wanted to be the first to cash in. Karen entered like a woman possessed by righteous fury, flanked by two friends whose loyalty was written in the tightness of their pressed lips and the way they refused to make eye contact with anyone who might dare question their queen. She wore a cream-colored blouse tucked into high-waisted jeans, her hair pulled back so severely it looked like her scalp was screaming, and in her right hand she clutched that envelope like it contained the nuclear codes. Her pearl earrings caught the overhead light with every sharp turn of her head, and her eyes, rimmed red either from crying or rage or both, swept across the room with the intensity of a searchlight hunting for fugitives. She didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, one hand pressed flat against the wood, the other holding that envelope aloft like a prosecutor presenting Exhibit A. Her presence alone declared, "I am the victim here and justice will be served today." 12 feet away, pressed against the far wall like she was trying to disappear into the paint, sat Judy. No entourage. No prepared statement. No envelope of her own. Just a faded blue hoodie 2 sizes too big, jeans with a rip in the knee that wasn't fashionable but functional, and white sneakers that had seen better days 3 years ago. Her brown hair fell loose around her face, unwashed and unstyled, framing eyes that darted between Karen and the door like a trapped animal calculating escape routes. She had no idea why she'd been summoned here, no clue what storm was about to break over her head, but the knot in her stomach told her it was bad. Judy was known in their circle as the quiet one, the girl who listened more than she spoke, who never started drama and certainly never inserted herself into other people's relationships. She worked double shifts at the diner on Route 9, went to community college part-time, and barely had energy for a social life, let alone the scheming, manipulative affair Karen was about to accuse her of. Her hands were shoved deep in her hoodie pockets, not out of defiance, but because they wouldn't stop shaking and she didn't want anyone to see how terrified she was. If Karen was a storm rolling in with thunder and lightning, Judy was the quiet house in its path, windows already rattling, praying the foundation would hold. But there was a third presence in that room, one that most people overlooked in those first few minutes, too focused on the brewing confrontation to notice the girl sitting in the back corner with her phone clutched in both hands like a lifeline. Melissa. Karen's best friend since the 7th grade, the one who'd been there for every breakup, every celebration, every 2 a.m. crying session over the past 12 years. She sat perfectly still, her bleached blonde hair falling forward to hide her face, her leg bouncing nervously under the table in a rhythm that matched her racing heartbeat. While everyone else leaned forward, eager to witness the carnage, Melissa seemed to be folding in on herself, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on her phone screen even though nothing was on it. She wore a black hoodie with the strings pulled tight, and if you looked closely, really looked, you'd see that her hands weren't just holding her phone. They were trembling. But no one was looking at Melissa. Not yet. All eyes were on Karen as she cleared her throat, commanding silence with nothing more than the tilt of her chin. The room fell into a hush so complete you could hear the ancient wall clock ticking, each second slicing through the tension like a metronome counting down to detonation. Karen didn't speak immediately. She let the silence build, let anticipation coil tighter and tighter until someone in the third row coughed and it sounded like a gunshot. Journalists in war zones moved with less deliberate care than the people in that room, each person afraid that even breathing too loudly might trigger the explosion. Phones glowed in the dim light, recording everything, preserving this moment for dissection and redistribution across every social media platform before the sun went down. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was a public execution, and Karen had built the gallows herself. "I called you all here," Karen began, her voice steady but laced with venom, "because some of you might think I'm crazy. Some of you might think I'm overreacting." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the room, making eye contact with each person as if daring them to challenge her. "But when you see what I'm about to show you, you'll understand why I had to do this publicly. Why she," and here she turned, pointing directly at Judy with the envelope still clutched in her hand, "doesn't get to hide anymore." Judy's face drained of color, confusion and fear colliding in her expression. She opened her mouth to speak, but Karen cut her off with a raised hand. "Don't. Just don't. You've done enough." The words hit like slaps, each one designed to wound, to establish dominance, to paint Judy as guilty before the evidence was even presented. Karen's fingers worked at the envelope seal with theatrical slowness, peeling it open like she was unwrapping a gift she both dreaded and anticipated. The paper inside was lavender, expensive stationery that you'd buy from one of those boutique shops downtown, the kind with textured edges and a faint floral scent that wafted through the room as she pulled it free. "I found this," Karen announced, her voice climbing higher now, losing some of that controlled fury and tipping into something rawer, more vulnerable, "in Mark's jacket pocket 3 days ago. My boyfriend's jacket. The man I've been dating for 6 months. The man I thought I'd marry someday." Her voice cracked on that last word, and for a moment, the anger fell away and what remained was just pain, stark and real and human. But then she blinked and the armor was back, the fury rekindled. "This is a love letter. Written to Mark. Signed with A.J." She held it up, displaying it like a prosecutor presenting murder weapon evidence to a jury. "And I think we all know who Jay is." Every head in the room turned toward Judy, a synchronized movement that felt choreographed, predatory. Judy shot to her feet, the metal folding chair screeching against linoleum like a wounded animal. "I didn't write that." Her voice cracked, not with guilt but with the desperate confusion of someone accused of a crime they can't even comprehend. "Karen, I swear to God, I have never written Mark a letter. I can't, this is insane." Her words tumbled over each other, frantic and unpolished, nothing like the calculated seduction Karen was describing. She looked around the room, searching for allies, for anyone who might believe her, but all she found were faces lit by phone screens, recording her panic, cataloging her defense for later judgment. "Mark and I talked at the gym, yeah, in groups with like 6 other people around. I've never been alone with him. Why would I do this?" Karen's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. "Because you wanted him. Because you've always been jealous of what I have." She began reading from the letter, her voice dripping with theatrical disgust. "Mark, I can't stop thinking about that conversation we had last week about your dreams of opening a garage." She looked up, eyes blazing. "Mark told me he shared that dream with you, Judy. At the gym. Alone by the weight rack." Mark, who'd been silent until now, shifted uncomfortably near the door, his face flushed red. "It wasn't alone, there were other people nearby, it was just talking." His weak defense only made things worse, made him look complicit, made Judy look guilty by association. But then a voice cut through the chaos, calm and analytical, belonging to Sarah Chin, an art teacher at the local high school who'd known most of them since they were teenagers finger painting in her classroom. "Karen, can I see that letter?" She stood, hand extended, her tone carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd spent 20 years managing rooms full of dramatic adolescents. Karen hesitated, clutching the letter tighter. "Why?" Sarah's expression didn't change. "Because if Judy really wrote this, the handwriting will prove it. And if she didn't, it'll prove that too. Unless you don't actually want to know the truth." The challenge hung in the air, impossible to refuse without looking like the one with something to hide. Grudgingly, Karen handed over the letter, and Sarah moved to the center of the room where the light was brightest, holding the lavender paper up like a jeweler examining a diamond for flaws. "Judy," Sarah said quietly, "do you have something you can write on?" Same sentence. "Right, Mark, I can't stop thinking about that conversation." Someone handed Judy a pen and a napkin, and with shaking hands she scrawled the words. Sarah placed them side by side on the table, and even from the back row the differences were visible. The loops, the slants, the pressure, nothing matched. Sarah looked up, her face grave. These weren't written by the same person. Not even close. The room erupted into chaos, voices overlapping like competing radio stations, everyone talking at once and no one listening. Karen's face cycled through emotions too fast to name, confusion bleeding into denial, bleeding into something that looked almost like fear. "That's impossible," she whispered, but her voice had lost its edge, the prosecutorial confidence crumbling like wet paper. Maybe she practiced, maybe she disguised it, maybe? But Sarah was already shaking her head, her finger tracing the curves of letters that told a story Karen didn't want to hear. "You can't fake natural hand patterns. Whoever wrote this letter has completely different writing mechanics than Judy. Different dominant hand slant, different pressure points, different letter formation. This is someone else entirely." Mark stepped forward, his confusion genuine and growing. "Then who? Who would know those things about me? Who would want to break us up?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and suddenly everyone was looking around, suspicion spreading like infection through the room. Someone close to Karen. Someone who knew the intimate details of their relationship. Someone who had access to Mark's jacket or Karen's space. The list of suspects was short, and as people began mentally cataloging who fit the criteria, eyes started drifting toward the back corner where Melissa sat frozen, her face the color of old newspaper. "Melissa left," someone said, pointing to the empty chair. "When did she leave?" The question sparked a realization that rippled through the room. Melissa had been there when this started, sitting quiet in the back, and now she was gone, slipped out like smoke through a crack while everyone was focused on the handwriting analysis. Karen's head snapped toward the empty chair, and something shifted in her expression, a crack forming in the foundation of her certainty. "Sarah," Karen said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "when's the last time Melissa wrote me something?" Sarah's eyebrows rose. "Your birthday was last month, right? Did she give you a card?" Karen pulled out her phone with hands that had suddenly forgotten how to be steady, scrolling through photos until she found it. A birthday card, pink and glittery, with a long handwritten message inside that Karen had photographed because it was sweet, because Melissa had always been thoughtful that way, because 12 years of friendship meant preserving moments like these. She held the phone out to Sarah with the same reluctance someone might hand over evidence of their own crime. Sarah took it, zoomed in on the handwriting, and placed the phone next to the love letter on the table. The silence that followed was the kind that exists in the second before a car crash, when time slows down and you can see the impact coming but can't do anything to stop it. "Karen," Sarah said softly, and the gentleness in her tone was worse than any accusation, "Melissa wrote this letter." The room didn't explode this time. It imploded, collapsing inward on itself as everyone processed what those 4 words meant. Karen stood motionless, the phone still in her outstretched hand, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words in a language she'd forgotten. "No," she finally managed, but it came out broken, less a denial and more a plea. "No, she wouldn't. We've been best friends since we were 12. She wouldn't do this to me." But even as she spoke, her eyes were scanning the handwriting comparison, seeing what everyone else could already see, the perfect match that damned the one person she trusted above all others. The pearl earrings that had caught light so dramatically earlier now just hung there, lifeless, like everything else about her in that moment. Someone had gone to find Melissa, and now voices echoed from the hallway, one protesting weakly, one insisting firmly. Then the door opened and Melissa stumbled back into the room, her mascara smeared down her cheeks in black rivers, her eyes red and swollen, looking like someone being led to their own sentencing. The friend who'd retrieved. Her stepped aside, and Melissa stood there in the doorway, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights that made her look small and pale and desperately young. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes, especially not Karen's. The room watched in suffocating silence as Karen walked toward her, each step measured and deliberate, closing the distance between them until they were face to face, close enough that Melissa could probably feel the heat of Karen's anger radiating off her skin. "Tell me they're wrong." Karen's voice was barely audible, shaking with the effort of holding herself together. "Tell me you didn't write that letter. Tell me my best friend didn't try to destroy my relationship and frame an innocent person for it." Melissa's lips trembled and tears spilled faster, but no words came out. Just silence, heavy and damning and absolute. That silence was the confession Karen didn't want to hear, the truth that shattered whatever was left of the person she'd been when she walked into this room an hour ago. "Say something." Karen's voice cracked into a scream, raw and wounded and desperate. "You owe me that much. You owe me an explanation." Melissa's voice, when it finally came, was so quiet that people in the back had to lean forward to hear it. "It wasn't about Mark." The words fell like stones into still water. Karen blinked, confused. "What?" Melissa looked up for the first time, and her eyes were full of something that looked almost like relief, like she'd been carrying this weight for so long that even exposure felt lighter than hiding. I don't have feelings for Mark. I never did. I don't even like him that way. She wiped her face with her sleeve, smearing the mascara further. I did it because you left me behind. The confession hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled, everyone waiting for the explosion, but what came instead was somehow worse. Understanding. The slow, creeping realization that this wasn't a story with a clear villain, but something far more complicated and human and painful. Melissa's voice gained strength as the dam finally broke, 12 years of resentment pouring out in words she'd never had the courage to say when they might have actually mattered. We used to do everything together. Every Friday night was movie night. Every Sunday was brunch at Lou's Diner. You called me first when anything happened, good or bad. And then Mark showed up and you disappeared. Her hands gestured wildly, trying to shape the invisible thing she'd lost. 8 weeks, Karen. 8 weeks in a row you canceled our Thursday tradition. My mom's birthday party, you showed up 20 minutes late and left after 15 because Mark texted. I invited you to help me move apartments and you said you were busy, but I saw your Instagram story at the beach with him that same day. Karen's face shifted, anger melting into something more complex, recognition flickering in her eyes like a candle trying to stay lit in the wind. So you wrote a fake love letter? You tried to ruin my relationship because I was spending time with my boyfriend? Her voice still carried anger, but it was duller now, confused, hurt in a different way than before. Melissa shook her head violently. I wasn't thinking clearly. I missed you. I missed my best friend. And I thought if you broke up with him, maybe you'd remember I existed. Maybe we could go back to how things were. She looked around the room, finally seeing all the faces staring at her, all the phones recording her breakdown for posterity. I know how it sounds. I know it was crazy and wrong and God, Judy, I'm so sorry. She turned to Judy, who'd been watching this unfold with an expression somewhere between vindication and exhaustion. I almost destroyed your reputation because I was jealous and lonely and I didn't know how to just tell Karen how I felt. Judy stood slowly, her posture still defensive, still hurt. You should have told her. You should have talked like adults instead of playing games that could have ruined my life. Do you understand what you almost did to me? Her voice cracked. This is a small town, Karen. If people believed I was the kind of person who goes after other women's boyfriends, that follows you. That becomes who you are in every room you walk into. She grabbed her bag from the chair, slinging it over her shoulder with finality. I accept that you're sorry, Melissa, but sorry doesn't undo standing in front of all these people being called a liar and a homewrecker. She turned to Karen, and there was no anger left in her eyes, just tired resignation. You should have asked me privately first. You should have given me the benefit of the doubt before you made this a public spectacle. We weren't close friends, but I thought we were at least friendly enough for that. Karen opened her mouth, but Judy held up a hand. I'm not interested in your apology right now. Maybe later when this doesn't feel so fresh. But right now, I need to leave before I say something I'll regret. She walked toward the door and this time no one tried to stop her. The room watched her go, watched the only truly innocent person in this mess walk out with her dignity intact but her trust in people shattered. The door closed behind Judy with a soft click that sounded louder than any scream could have, and what remained in that community center back room was the wreckage of something that couldn't be rebuilt with apologies or explanations. Karen stood in the center of it all, looking between Melissa and the empty doorway, her hands hanging limp at her sides like she'd forgotten what they were for. Mark approached her cautiously, the way you'd approach a wounded animal, and placed a hand on her shoulder. Are we okay? He asked, voice low enough that only she could hear, but in the silence of that room, everyone heard anyway. Karen didn't answer immediately. She was staring at Melissa, really seeing her for the first time in months, seeing the dark circles under her eyes, the bitten-down fingernails, the desperate loneliness that had been there all along if only Karen had bothered to look. I need time, Karen finally said, not to Mark but to the room, to herself, to the smoking ruins of friendships she'd taken for granted. I need time to figure out who I'm angry at and why. She looked at Melissa and her voice softened just slightly, enough to hurt more than anger would have. You were wrong to do what you did. It was manipulative and cruel and you hurt people who didn't deserve it. Melissa nodded, tears still streaming, accepting the judgment. But I wasn't right either. I ghosted you. I canceled on you. I made you feel invisible and then got mad when you tried to make me see you. The admission cost her something, you could see it in the way her shoulders sagged, in the way she had to swallow hard before continuing. That doesn't make what you did okay. But it means I have to own my part in why we're standing here. By that evening, the videos were everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook groups with names like Riverside Drama Updates, where housewives and teenagers dissected every angle with the fervor of forensic analysts. Some people sided with Karen, calling Melissa psychotic and obsessed. Others pointed out that Karen had been a terrible friend long before Melissa wrote that letter. Team Judy emerged strong, demanding public apologies and calling for Melissa to be socially exiled. But buried in the comments, between the hot takes and the moral judgments, were quieter confessions. People admitting they'd felt left behind when their best friend got into a relationship. People acknowledging they'd neglected friendships when they fell in love. People recognizing themselves in Melissa's desperation or Karen's obliviousness or Judy's wounded dignity. Because this wasn't just about 3 people in a small town. It was about the universal truth that love, whether romantic or platonic, requires attention and intention, and when you withdraw one without explanation, you create wounds that fester in the dark. 2 months later, Melissa moved to the next town over, seeking a fresh start away from the whispers and the stares. Karen and Mark were still together, but different, more careful with each other, more aware of the relationships outside theirs that needed tending. And Judy? She'd learned that forgiveness was optional and that sometimes the healthiest thing you could do was walk away from people who hurt you, even if they hadn't meant to. The fake love letter had revealed the truth, just not the one Karen expected.